Today on the Magick Kitchen, we're talking about scammers and spotting those fake witches. I'm Leandra Witchwood.
And I'm Elyse Welles.
And welcome to the Magick Kitchen Podcast, where we talk about magic, kitchen witchcraft, herbs,
and everything in between.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Magick Kitchen. Elyse and I were sitting here talking about some of the great fake accounts and fake witches we've run into. And I do hesitate using the word fake witch because this path does not have any solid defining factors that make it real or fake. But we're mainly talking about those who regurgitate information without actually living their craft, and those scammer accounts that, slide into your DMs and tell you to, give them money so that they can do a reading for you, that sort of thing. So I know this is a fun thing for everybody. So let's talk about it.
I was victimized by one of these scammer accounts.
Yes.
Recently on Instagram, somebody created a fake Seeking Numina account.
Yeah. And then, how much money did they earn from that when you are trying to do it the legitimate way and actually give people value? And I think it's such a huge problem that we as a community need to police. If we notice that fake accounts are popping up for our favorite, voices and witches, then we should be, calling that out and bringing that to everybody's attention. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
My pet peeve, I haven't had the experience yet with having somebody create an account that is my personality yet, knock on wood, but it could happen. So my issue is with the witches who are, I'm using air quotes right now, you can't see me, but I'm using air quotes, the ones that want to teach you about witchcraft, who know it all, and they can give you all the ideas and all the examples and teach you how to practice, but they don't have really anything that backs that up, if that makes any sense. So I have some points here that I want to make, but bear with me. I'm not talking about people who do practice every single day and, show you their altars or anything like that. I think one of the things that Elyse and I ran into recently also was that somebody's saying that if you talk about your craft, then you're not a real witch, which is total bogus, because you can talk about your craft. You can practice your craft openly and still be a real witch. So that has nothing to do with it. But I think what it mostly boils down to is doing our own personal research on the person that we're following and seeing how they behave in the the realm of social media, and seeing how they behave outside, if they even have a presence outside. What are your thoughts, Elyse?
I think that people need to have a presence outside of social media to be anybody who can teach you. If you see somebody and all they have is an Instagram, that's fine. That's not somebody you shouldn't respect or value or find friendship with or find inspiration in. Maybe they have a cool altar and you're inspired by that. But you can't then learn from that person. It's going to be a tertiary experience. If they have courses online, if they host rituals or workshops, if they have drum circles, if they run a pagan blog or a witchy blog or a spiritual blog, if they have a YouTube channel, if they post meditations, these are all things that show depth and experience and wherewithal. And the other thing that you need to think about when you're looking for a teacher is the practical aspect of it. Are they somebody who has their life together? You should never in this life take advice from somebody who doesn't have a life that you would in some way like to emulate. So if they just have a social media account, but they're saying, yeah, I can really help you and you can grow with me, but they don't have examples of that, if there's no testimonials, if there's no online resources that look really good and feel great to read, if they don't have something that tangible that you can then dig deeper to find, then they're not the person to learn from. There's somebody to be inspired by and follow and get to know. And maybe later on their journey, they do have those things and then they're ready for you. But that's not going to happen just on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook. It has to be deeper.
Yeah. Well, and not just like where they show up. So that's a big, huge thing. And I like to look for people who show up in real life, not just on social media, to add to that. Because I want to see that they're helping run a pagan pride day. I want to see that they have a shop that they're running. I want to see that they are teaching in-person classes or doing workshops, or like what you mentioned, like teaching online where they actually show up physically in a Zoom. Well, I guess that's still virtually, but they in real time show up. They show up live to teach, and the content that they're teaching isn't something that's regurgitated. So I think that's one area that kind of irks me a lot, is a lot of what you see in a lot of these, supposed experts is a bunch of regurgitation, or they're showing a version of you. And I mean, I'm bouncing around, but they're showing a version of themselves to you that is very polished and very, guru-centric, where they know it all and how dare you question them or anything like that. So yeah, I don't want to touch on all these things in more detail, but there's so many things that like come to mind where I'm like, wow, why do these people have hundreds of thousands of followers? And I think it's because they stroke the ego. They get down to the core of where you feel inadequate and they address it. Instead of really giving you nuts and bolts and nuggets of golden information that help you solve it, they commiserate with you or they validate you in some way. And I think that's a red flag. And if we look at any kind of narcissistic behavior in anybody, and we all have it, we're all, narcissists to some degree because we're human. From infancy, we learn how to manipulate and so we can get what we want, right? But there's a point where when you are truly walking this path, you realize, oh crap, that's a manipulated behavior. I'm going to stop doing it, or I'm going to start addressing it so I'm not doing it. But what I notice in a lot of these creators is they're exactly that. They're a creator. They are not a genuinely bona fide witch who has been practicing for a long time, who genuinely has knowledge based on experience. They have knowledge based on a book they read, off of a class they took, off of some other creator's content, that sort of thing. So they're not actually trying to serve a benefit to you. They're trying to benefit themselves or trying to get followers. And that's one of the biggest things to remember, is that everyone, even Elyse and I on social media, yes, we're trying to increase our followers, but there's a different motivation for it than just notoriety and having our face seen by everybody. There's a point where you gain followers so you can reach more people, so you can help more people, or you're trying to increase your followers just because you want to get famous. You want to be TikTok famous, you want to be YouTube famous, whatever. So the first thing that I mentioned, or one of the things I mentioned that I first want to go over, is consider how long they have been practicing and and I want to address why having this experience is important. So Elyse and I both have been practicing since the 90s. And, this is pre-internet. This is when you had to go off of book knowledge or find a physical coven to work with. And nowadays it's different. So the craft looks very different now than it did 20, 30 years ago, which is important, because when you have that evolution under your belt and you've watched it evolve, then you get a better, deeper understanding of who's practicing, why we're practicing, and what we've practiced in the past. This is not a be-all, end-all metric for determining that a witch is fake or, just a creator looking to get likes and follows. But this gives you a very rich history of the craft if you can learn from somebody like this, because they've seen it evolve. I've seen the craft go from the 80s into the 90s, and it started to morph from this very ceremonial, Gardnerian, Alexandrian, Golden Dawn style craft where you had to go through the great rite. You had to do all these things that were very, very misogynistic in nature, to now where it's becoming more folk magic and it's more female empowered instead of being female dominated. And those are two different things. So the craft, in my experience, going from the 90s into the 2000s and now where we are now, at one point it was still very patriarchal. It was still very going back to the Golden Dawn and Gardnerian and Alexandrian styles, where the ceremonial magic required women to still be the servants. We still had to go, and if nobody knows what the great rite is, go look it up, because it is, to me now looking back, I think it's a disgusting practice. And I'm going to piss some people off with that, but I really think it's a disgusting practice, expecting those kind of acts to validate your path. So now, moving into where we are now, we don't see that anymore, not as much anymore. I mean, there are still some covens that will require that kind of behavior or that kind of quote unquote, and I'm doing this rolling my eyes, dedication as part of the initiation. But now it's more frowned upon because women are like, whoa, wait a minute. Why am I being expected to do that just to prove that I am part of this path and that I'm part of a coven and that I am, dedicated enough to my path to progress?
And I think what's so important about having the experience is having this understanding of where this came from. So that's not to say you can't learn from somebody young. Like, I'm young, but I have a lot of students that are in their 50s. Why? Because I've been practicing witchcraft longer than they have. That's the fact. I've been practicing for over 10 years, and I wasn't around practicing in the 90s. I was around a little bit. I was quite young. I won't tell y'all how young, but I did learn in a 90s fashion. All the books I read were published in around the 70s, 80s, 90s at the at the latest. And, it was still before the internet. It was still the 2000s. Like, I didn't have a means of Googling these things. And once I started to, I couldn't use the family computer for that stuff. Come on. But then once I started going to college and having the chance to expand this, I actually then studied for my master's degree, the history of witchcraft. Not exclusively, but that was my concentration as a history and liberal arts major. So, I mean, I really made it my business to feel authoritative in this before I came to teaching. And I've seen some people, I thought they had it. Like, I thought they were aware of history. And so I'll start a conversation with them, and, they hadn't heard of, Gardnerian Wicca at all.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's really important to have that foundation, because that's how you know what to keep and what to discard. And that's how you know who you're talking to. Because I've been in conversations, even my hand fasting, I had Gardnerian Wiccans there. I had my tradition, which is an eclectic fairy-based tradition, which is now morphed into an Appalachian folk tradition. It's a really unique path that's 5 generations deep. Leandra was there, and she's got her own tradition. There's so many different traditions that can come together, but you still want to know what each other believes. You want to be able to have conversations about the differences. And that experience is going to be important. And also, as a teacher, your students might believe, and probably will believe, something different than you. So you want to be able to reach them where they are and help them get where they want to get without influencing their beliefs and saying, well, all I know is what I know. You want to know what else is out there. And that only comes from experience, study, and dedication. And I think that goes into this second piece of unique ideas. Like, your teacher, if you're going to learn from somebody and you're going to respect their advice in a spiritual way, it's the most personal way you can take something, I think. So you need to know that they got it in a personal way too. So if their ideas are, I mean, I've really seen this, a screenshot of somebody else's post, and they say a whole thing about the thing, and you're like, oh, and then at the end it says credit from reposts from so-and-so. At least they're being upfront, but they still kind of hide it at the bottom.
Yes.
So, maybe it's still good information, but you shouldn't attribute that information to the person you saw it posted from. You should look at that original account, follow them, see where they get their info, and continue your research journey for a teacher, because that's really important. Like, when I get quote unquote downloads, or messages.
Yeah.
I recently got a message for one of my community members about their aura shifting in color in a positive way. And it seemed really strange and out of tone. And I'm not like an aura reader usually, but that was the message I got for them. So I shared it with them and it really resonated and we had a great conversation about it. And that's the kind of thing that a teacher should be able to do, is like look beyond the logical and, you know, accept that this is going to feel really unique and out there. And then that's usually the stuff that's going to be the most helpful and reach the people it's supposed to reach. And that was a message reaching one person intentionally. That was it. That was the only person who was supposed to hear that message. And it's important to remember that on social media, people have to post what's going to reach and affect the most people. So it's not going to be for you. It's going to be for likes and follows. And, you know, maybe they have to spin it in a certain way. And these are strategies I've studied because I'm in a position as a teacher and a full-time writer where if I want to keep doing what I'm doing, I need to see the support coming back to me from my community. You know, me and Leandra do a lot, and it's not free for us when it comes down to our time or our money. So it really means a lot when we see that support back from the community. And that support only comes if you guys know what we're doing. So I've been studying social media and seeing how I can extend my reach. And I've had to straight up neglect some of these strategies, quotation marks, because I just can't agree with them. Like they'll say, whatever you need to say, post it in a controversial way. That's actual advice.
That's cringy.
That I come across constantly. Yeah. And I just, you know, it's hard. It's really hard out here to be authentic on the internet when, to be honest, the people who are making it are being less authentic. So
probably, yeah.
So there's be vigilant.
And you have to sift through the muck because there are some very authentic people out there who are doing really well for themselves. But I think it's because they refuse to conform to the typical marketing things that are happening right now. They give just enough of themselves and then require you to go further with them in order to get the full deal, which is, I think that's right. I mean, really, if you look at it, even if you were in a coven, a high priestess, a high priest, an elder, they're not going to give you everything in one shot. First of all, there's too much. There's way too much. So people that, you know, will only give you so much of themselves and then expect you to invest in them before you get the rest of it is absolutely okay. And I've seen too many people get shamed for that because I understand, like, there's that fine line where, like, how do you know they're just not scamming me or fake, or that I'm just not going to get, you know, more basic, shallow information. You can't be sure of that. You have to take a chance. And if you find somebody that you really resonate with, that you really feel like they help you, then invest in them, because that is going to help you either understand the predatory behavior that's on social media, or you're actually going to get the help you're looking for. Yeah. So it is a trial and error, and you can't be sure 100% of the time, but you gotta jump in to find out.
Yeah. And that's where, you know, being able to tell how somebody's coming at their craft and how they're showing it to you on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok.
Yeah.
How do they position themselves? Are they trying too hard to look like the all-knowing? Do they try to resist looking like they make mistakes or like things go wrong for them? I think there's a grace we need to give where, like, do they present themselves as too perfect? Like, if their photos are always really good, I feel like you can't criticize them for that because sadly the algorithm only shows good photos. So, like, that's a frustration. But if in the caption, everything's always going well, or it's not going deep enough, then that's a red flag. That's somebody you might not want to take too seriously. Maybe you follow them because they take great pictures of candles, but they never tell you why they're lighting that candle or what the candle's about.
What's the context?
There needs to be a conversation in the caption. And that's the beauty of Instagram versus like TikTok. I think TikTok is more visual and less descriptive.
But here's the other catalyst that I find on social media when people are trying to go deeper, they're trying to be more authentic. That's a really hard thing to convey because usually when you're going deeper, it is complex. And when you're going deeper, when you're trying to show the nitty gritty, people lose interest pretty quickly. Like if it's not shiny, flashy, ooh, sparkle, sparkle, people don't want anything to do with it. So you're not going to get the followers that you probably should, especially when you're looking at this path. But most people, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to piss more people off. I don't care. Most people are looking for that quick hit, shallow knowledge. They don't really want to go deep. Because deep means addressing things that we don't like to address. It means looking in that mirror. It means addressing the shadows. And I follow a couple people on TikTok that make me cringe because they claim to be these deep, all-knowing people. But when you get down to it, they're just shallow. And it makes me cringe because I understand why. For one, if they went too deep, they would lose people. People would be like, whoa, that's too much. I can't deal with that right now. And so they really go to the shallow end of the pool, and it's cringy because it feels fake. It feels rehearsed. And that's a difficult thing because they might actually have some decent information, but if you are anywhere in your path where you need to get off that cusp of intermediate and beginner and you need to dive into that deep pool, it's going to be harder for you to find these people because, again, the algorithm does not like anything but shiny, flashy, that it has 100 comments on it type thing, you know? So another way to really like determine if they're fake or not, or if they're just in that shallow end of the pool, look at where they've gotten their ideas. If they are just, and this just requires you to do kind of like a search and maybe even read your books type thing. So if they, like I literally watched somebody hold a book in front of their face on camera and just read from the book. Like there was no personal anecdote to it. There was no personal experience added to it. Like it's fine to sit there and like, especially if you're in a book club or something like that, to read the passage, but then you discuss the passage. You don't teach from the book. And I've even experienced this in real life with a coven before, the internet and before social media was a thing, where literally the high priestess, I use that term loosely, and you've heard me talk about this a few times. She literally would pass a book around to the circle and have each of us in the coven read a passage from the book. It was like kindergarten.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And so she didn't want to read the books herself. So she would have us read it to her, which is it was ridiculous. And I didn't, and being a new baby witch, only practicing for a few years. Again, this goes, mirrors why practicing for some time matters. Like I didn't understand at that point that like, this was not okay. Like you don't take somebody else's work and just regurgitate it and use that as your primary source of education. I mean, if you see somebody that's using a book for reference, good. They're reading, they're doing their research, they got knowledge and they're gaining knowledge. But then what are they adding to that from their own personal experience? Are they just doing this nice nifty little storm spell because all of a sudden that is what the algorithm is blowing up with? Oh, storm magic. That's the trend right now. I need to get on that. That's where I think a big red flag comes from for me is if they're just copying a trend, then, where did they get it from? Is this like, are they just taking somebody else's idea and adopting it as their own? Or are they giving credit? Like Elyse said, like, where's the credit? Where are they giving due credit? So the next thing I like to look at is what's their position? Are they the all-knowing, or do they tell you that your form of the craft is wrong? This one makes me angry, makes me see red, because first of all, the craft has no dogma. We have no doctrine telling us how to do it, when to do it, where to do it. And I talk about this in detail in my Witchcraft for Beginners course on the Academy. So when we are looking at the positioning of the person that's teaching us, I don't think any of us we don't like to be talked down to. We don't like to be treated as if we know nothing. Because I will be honest with you, everything you need to know about witchcraft, you already know it. You already have it in you.
Mm-hmm.
Nature is teaching you right now. You don't need somebody with a good video camera and a microphone and access to a platform to tell you how to practice your craft. Now, there is a catalyst to that when you are Wiccan and you're following the Wiccan read or part of a coven that has certain tenets that you need to follow. That's a totally different story. What are your thoughts, Elyse?
Yeah, I think that when you have the craft online, you're always getting a filtered version of it. Whereas when you are learning for yourself, you're going to have experiences that you literally can't type out or talk about in a video. So
Right.
I think anybody who tells somebody that what they're doing is incorrect, that shouldn't even be a conversation piece. Like that to correct people just shouldn't really happen. Like it's not going to be part of a healthy discourse to correct somebody. To ask questions or to try to understand where somebody's coming from if it's something that you're really unfamiliar with is different. That can be very constructive. But criticism, truly, unsolicited advice and criticism are going to be red flags. And a lot of accounts get their, following from this negativity. And especially on TikTok, unless you get negative comments, you're not going to get comments. People don't comment,
Right.
Oh, nice, thank you. They're going to comment, excuse me, I believe blah, blah, blah. So a lot of times people will post provocative things on purpose. That's something to look out for. Is that the angle they're always coming from? Like it should come from a heart space when people share things, and they shouldn't be shutting down other people's beliefs as their main position as what witchcraft is,
And I think that's another form of gatekeeping too, when people are like, no, you're doing it wrong. It's that patriarchal colonized mindset of everybody has to look the same. Everybody has to do it the same. Everybody has to have the same tools.
It's a factory model. That's what we're raised to adhere to in all things. Yeah, it's so frustrating. So don't bring it to your craft. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I've touched on this a little bit on my TikTok that witchcraft is not the factory model. We have never been the factory model. Yeah, we might have, groups of us that practice similarly. I can't talk today. I haven't had enough tea. We might, seem to be similar, and we might seem to do things the same way. But even at the end of the day, when we go home and, go to our different corners, we all do our own thing our own way. And that should not be frowned upon. It should not. And if we want to share that with other people, we should feel like we could do that within our community, within our witchcraft community, without feeling like we're going to get, the hammer thrown down on us because some witch out there, self-proclaimed, whatever, decided that they didn't like how I lit my candle or how I anointed it or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm so annoyed with it. And to add to it, like I said, I follow a few people on TikTok that have me scratching my head a lot of the times, but I feel like I need to keep my finger on the pulse to see what's going on out there. And like the ones that come off as like, well, I'm the high priestess and I've been doing this and I know how to help you solve all the problems in your life. And like that's a huge red flag for me. When somebody's going to sit there and have all their makeup done and their hair done and they have a great background and looks good, right? So we automatically we're drawn in. But they're sitting there telling you how wrong you are for doing it this way and their way is the only way, or that they're just so knowledgeable about all this stuff, but they're not sharing anything in their path of how they came to this resolution. Like, so you claim to be able to solve all my problems with my ex-boyfriend, but you've not given me any example of how you've overcome that yourself. And I think that's a big red flag, is if someone's just going to say, oh, I know how to do this, just follow me, and they're not giving you any context. Or if you ask them about that privately and they're not going to give you any context, I think that's a red flag. and maybe it's just me, maybe I'm wrong in this, I don't know. But I feel like if someone's going to stand up there and say that they know how to do something, then they should have experience in actually doing it. So another thing that I like to be aware of and to kind of, throw my hat in as, okay, this is suspect, is those witches who are constantly connected. They're always downloading all this information. They're giving you these daily downloads, these weekly energetic updates and all this stuff. And I find this very suspect because we as witches have to balance 1 foot in, 1 foot out, 1 foot in this world, 1 foot in the other world. And this was like one of the first lessons that my mentor taught me, that if you are leaning too far in either direction for too long, you lose the other. So what I see happens is with these witches who are constantly connected, their personal biases and their personal disassociations or their personal psychology, good or bad or ugly, starts mixing in with these supposed quote unquote messages they're downloading. So recently I saw one witch talk about energetic weight gain. And it was interesting that she started talking about that because I had noticed over the past year, she probably had gained a few pounds. Who cares? We all gain weight. As we get older, we gain weight. Some of us more than others. So what? It's not about attributing some spiritual message to that. Sometimes we just gain weight because life happens, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like these downloads she gets is a lot of, and this is not just one person, it's several. Like these downloads they get, for one, it is for likes and follows. So they're going to tell you things that sound too good to be true or out of this world and so mystical that you can't possibly touch it because only they can touch it type thing. And then they start attributing like their own perceived negative happenings in their life to these downloads. Suddenly their weight gain becomes spiritual and it's necessary. And suddenly, they're, drinking every day becomes a spiritual act, whatever it is that happens. And maybe I'm not speaking, very clearly on it, but I've seen this happen a lot, that these everyday connections that, every minute of every day you're being connected with spirit, you're losing something in reality. You're losing something that keeps you grounded to this world and connected to this world.
And it becomes your crutch and excuse for why bad things are happening. Like it's the same thing that bothered me about Christians growing up. Mm-hmm. Oh, everything happens for a reason.
Right.
Well, no, honestly, not really. Like there's way more at play in this world that we can't make everything spiritually enriching. Like it's a temptation. Like when something really bad happens and we come through the trauma, like rather than saying that trauma was valid or somehow useful to us, like it's more spiritually uplifting to say that the way I handled it, the strength I found, my reaction to it, my choices. I think that's it. I think it's that there needs to be an element of control that you use your craft for. Like there can't just be this spirit guided this to happen to me, so I'm reacting to it. You're not reacting to the world when you're a witch. You are active in the world and in what happens to you.
I'm just personal accountability. We're still human. At the end of the day, we're still human. So we are going to have to be part of this human experience. And yes, maybe you have this download that happens every night, but that doesn't mean it's valid to everybody on your TikTok or everybody on your Instagram. It might only be valid to you.
So fake accounts. There's a difference here between like a fake witch or a witch who's not really practicing but just likes the aesthetic. I'm talking an actual impersonator, somebody who pretends to be somebody you actually follow. So one of my other favorite podcasters is Comfy Cozy Witch. She gets 7 or 8 fake accounts a month. I'm not even exaggerating. And it happened to me for the first time a couple of weeks ago. And I was just so hurt that it happened. I see it happening and I know it sucks and I always report the accounts. But that's what I want to talk about, is how to see through it. Because I had actual family members think it was me. People who have known me since I was a baby. And that really blew my mind. So I wanted to give everybody a criteria for spotting these fake accounts so that you won't be taken in. And not just for your own mental health to not be taken in by a scammer, because that feels bad to be taken advantage of, but also because it hurt me to know that my followers now had a distrust for me because they associate what the scammer did with me as an actual individual and teacher. And that even though you guys listen to the podcast, some of you guys still were taken in by a scammer. Like, you should know my voice. I am never going to message you and say, "Grand Rising, loves. If you have $100, I'd love to talk to you." I mean, that's literally a screenshot I got. I know. So that's red flag number one. If somebody's language is spammy and creepy and weird and full of emojis and there's no grammar either, like, that ain't them. And then if you message them back and the response is very canned and generic, it's a bot. These spam accounts are downloading apps and cloning the full account of a person. It's the worst on Instagram, I will say. And then messaging the entire follower base and, harvesting whatever they can money-wise from you. And, the other thing that drives me nuts is they're charging hundreds of dollars for a tarot reading. Like, I don't advertise that I do readings because of these scam accounts. I don't want anybody ever to think that I'm a fake witch or somebody who is trying to take advantage of people. But if you messaged me and were like, "Hey, I really have a rapport with you and I would love a tarot reading," I would do one for you. But I will never DM you. I have that in my biography, actually, on Instagram, simply because I would never want to be associated with this. So if you ever get a DM from a magical practitioner, I can tell you it's not them. Like, they're never going to DM you out of the blue. The exception to this, of course, is if you have a relationship with them, if you've already had conversations in Messenger, if there's a thread of messages and you know what they're like and they're sending you a meme or something, that's different. I'm not saying like witches don't use the DM function. I'm saying this creepy, "I have a message that spirit has for you. Like, your ancestor came through for me and I wanted to share." I mean, it just doesn't happen.
Well, wait, hold up right there. Like, why would my ancestor be going to somebody random?
Some other things you can look for to know if it's a fake account. How are they spelling the name? Usually there's going to be extra letters in there. Like, for me, my fake account was Seeking Numina with 2 I's. So it was Miina at the end. Comfy Cozy Witch gets this a lot, where they'll spell like cozy with like 4 Y's. I just saw one for J. Allen Cross. He's another witch podcaster. And Oregon is in his, I forget his exact tag, but it was spelled, Oregon was spelled wrong with an E-N instead of an O-N. So the spellings will be incorrect or have extra letters, or they'll add periods or underscores where they don't exist. Yeah. And then look at when the posts have been published. If the posts are all published within that week and there's 300 some posts, or if they're all published on the same day, or if they're all published in the same hour and it just was created and this person must have existed longer than that because they have 375 posts, then that's a red flag. And the other thing you can do is simply search that name. Like, Seeking Numina might be hard for you to search, but you could search Elyse Welles and you'd find just me, and then maybe the spam account. So that's what you should do when you see your poor practitioners out there working hard and then having their identity stolen, because that's what it is. It's very violating. It's a very violating feeling to have your identity stolen like that. And then to know that your followers, people who trust you, are being taken advantage of.
Yeah, I think another way, okay, so in addition to the scammers, there's also those ones that, are, they're not necessarily a fake account, but this is one thing that I learned really quickly about, like, determining if the person I'm following is genuinely there to teach me, to help me on my path, or that they're just looking for money. So one person I follow, I commented on one of her posts and I'm like, "Oh, relating to her, like, oh, you have that experience. I have that experience too. Very cool. Nice to meet somebody that has a similar experience. Immediately, the response was, oh, would you like me to do a reading for you? I think I should do a reading for you. I'm like, what? No, I never asked for a reading.
Yeah.
I was just saying, hey, nice to meet somebody that has a similar experience. Like, it was totally unrelated, and it was completely spamming. Even though I was in her comments, it was still a spammy response. It wasn't a genuine response. It wasn't a human response even. It almost seemed like it was robotic. So yeah, just keep your eye out. Like, use your critical thinking, honestly, and get out there and really pay attention to who you're following. Don't just blindly follow people and take their advice as it is. Like, really, okay, so where did they get that information? How did they come by that? How did they know to do that? Who taught them? You know, I really still value people who are taught by other people that have a line that can be traced. And that doesn't necessarily mean hereditary. Oh, I guess that's another one that I want to touch on is people who claim that witchcraft is only hereditary. That's total bullshit. So,
yeah.
But what I do look for is people that have a line. Okay, so like, I'll use my experience because I will walk my talk, and I will demonstrate to you my experience and how I came to where I am today. So I started learning solitary books, and this was when, you know, there was really no internet, so I couldn't go to websites and stuff like that, but it was mostly books. So I was at my library, I was at my bookstores, that sort of thing, reading. Then when I started feeling like I needed to know more, when I couldn't get what I needed out of books, then I started searching for a coven. So one of my first covens that I practiced with, they were non-denominational. They were part of the cups that was in my local area. So that was very non-denominational. It was more like church service type thing rather than a coven. But it was the cups group that, oh, by the way, if you don't know this, Starhawk started, who goes way, way back.
Yeah.
So I consider her like one of my elder teachers too, because her books were some of the first books that I read. Then when I moved here to Pennsylvania, I'm like, okay, I still want to work with a coven. So I started seeking out covens. And let me tell you, like, I interviewed with a bunch of freaking duds before I found one that I thought was okay. And even 9 months into working with that coven, that's when I realized that one was a huge dud too. And so this is where experience comes from. Like, you practice and work with other witches to really get a context of what's out there. So I moved from that coven into, and that was a fairy tradition. So it was very loose fairy tradition. I really don't think that she really didn't run the coven according to the fairy tradition. It was kind of like her idea of what fairy should be. So it was very much, she had been book taught, never really worked with another coven, and decided that she was just going to be a leader of a coven. So that's the context behind that one. Then I went and I sought out another high priestess who not only ran a coven in the 70s and 80s, but was initiated into a Gardnerian style coven. But she had morphed her practice into an elven tradition based off of Tolkien and his works and the elves. So the Ainur and all that. And before she would even work with me, she's like, you're going to go out and you're going to work with other people. I'm like, what? No, I want to work with you, right? She said, no, you're going to go out and you're going to explore the craft before you even come back to me and expect me to teach you. I'm like, okay. That was the best advice I was ever given about the craft. Go out and explore. What are you talking about? I want to learn from you. No, go explore. Go, shoo, off with you. Come back to me in like 6 months. Okay. So that led me to working with the reclaiming folk. That led me to working with Black Forest Clan. That led me to all kinds of experiences I would never have had otherwise, because otherwise I would have remained in my little box thinking that I knew it all because I had this perspective that was contained in this little bubble, right? So when I came back to her, then she taught me the nitty gritty. She taught me the ceremonial magic. She taught me high magic. She taught me the elven magic. She taught me, challenge at the gate. She taught me, what the real great rite is on the outside. But now she never expected us to do the great rite, but she was adamant about learning about it and what it really was. It's not a symbolic thing. Don't let people tell you it's a symbolic thing. That's the nice patriarchal way of saying that they're expecting you to do this act. Okay. And if you still don't know what I mean, go look it up. I'm going to make you do your research. So that's how I started growing into my position as leader. And Elyse and I were talking about this before we started recording. Like, I still have a really hard time accepting title as priestess, because to me, it's so pretentious. I see people online all the time. I'm the high priestess of blah, 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 blah. Like, oh, fuck off. Okay. I'm laughing, but at the same time, it irritates the hell out of me because it's so pretentious. And I know it's part of my shadow. It's part of the work that I'm working on. I have such a negative connotation associated with priestess and high priestess because I've gone through the patriarchy model, the hierarchical model of what Wicca is and that version of witchcraft. And I've seen how people in those positions use their authority, use their power, use their charisma to schmooze you and get you to just accept things and dismiss things that are red flags and that sort of thing. So I have a real hard time when somebody stares at you through a camera and claims to be the high priestess that you should, obey and listen to. So just that's why I have that red flag, and I'm totally upfront with that. But my history is where I have come to grow and learn and work with other covens, and I've been everywhere, like from California to Pennsylvania. I have worked with a ton of different covens within those miles, virtually, physically, and it's an amazing journey when you can look back and go, oh crap, I've done a lot. But You're not going to hear me sit on social media and stare at you in the camera and go, I know it all, so listen to me, okay? So knowing where the person comes from is incredibly important. Knowing why they have an authority is incredibly important.
Yeah. Yeah. And we did a full episode on our lineage back in season 2, I believe. So I encourage people to go back there. If you're thinking about working with us outside of listening to the podcast and you're not sure if we're the right teachers for you, if we're valid, if we've been witches long enough to work with you, like, check out our lineages in that episode because we really get into the nitty gritty of it. But now I feel like I need to give a little bit of my background on here because I'm a youngling, but I've been around. So I've lived on 3 continents. So I lived in the Middle East, and I lived in a really tiny island called Bahrain. And while I was there, I hadn't worked with a coven or really witchcraft yet, but I got really close with the Indian community. About a third of the population in Bahrain is Indian. And at school, most of my peers were Indian. So I got to celebrate Hindu ceremonies, and I also had a lot of Buddhist friends. So between experiencing both of those religions, that was a lot of where I learned that, Christianity isn't cutting it, to say it lightly. So that's when it's been funny because I got back to the States. I went to college in Pennsylvania. And that's where I found my coven. So my coven is fairy tradition, but eclectic. So we don't have to work with any specific pantheon or deities or spirits. But what we do all work with collectively is the idea that there are fairies. And so my coven, my experience with witchcraft, like I said, started with books at my local library from the 90s and back. And I came to my coven with that basis of knowledge. And I got a very Celtic / westernized perspective on witchcraft, definitely with a Wicca lineage. My coven's 5 generations deep now, and coming from Wicca. But then lately, so I got the call from Spirit to move to Greece and practice the craft here. So that's been what I've been trying to learn. And I met somebody here, which I don't think any of this is in that episode because it's been a while since we recorded that. But I've now done a bit more training in ceremonial magic. It's still, I'll be honest, it's not for me, but I enjoy learning more about it. And Reiki I've been studying, and I've also been more pulled, ironically, in a spiral back to Ayurveda. So by the time this episode comes out, I will have completed a pilgrimage to India where I'll be studying the ancient temples. I'll be visiting all the ancient temples and studying Ayurvedic practices and yoga. And hopefully we'll have found an ashram, because that's one of my main goals in this first visit there, is to find that. So I really believe in this like eclectic spiritual path that witchcraft is the gateway towards. And that's where a lot of my background comes in. Like I have a deep foundation in the Western craft, but I've been around Asia, Europe, and the States and the UK, studying witchcraft and pagan beliefs, because paganism and witchcraft, they go together in the West, but paganism is this idea that there's more than one God, and you just kind of, it actually means like of the folk people. That's what the word pagan means, like country folk. So it's so natural that everybody the world over right now is getting more involved with their folk practices. Yeah. So in a lot of ways, simpler is better now. I think ceremonial had its heyday. But yeah, I think that's another rule of thumb for getting to know a teacher or somebody you might want to work with, like, or somebody you're going to take advice from at all. Is their power, is what they're doing more powerful than it is pretty, I guess?
Oh, yeah. Good. Yeah.
I think magic is a lot more powerful on what's going on inside than what's going on in a visual outside way.
Right. Yeah. I really, to like wrap this whole thing up, I think it's about being critical, using your critical thinking.
Yeah, critical thinking. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And don't take people at face value. Hell, don't take Elyse and me at face value. Like, do your research.
Scrutinize.
Go check us out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go check us out. And I think that's the mark of someone who's genuine, is if they're not afraid to let you look them up, see how long they've been around, see, I mean, if Witchvox was around, you'd see that I was writing articles for Witchvox back in like 2000, I don't know, not even that, like 1999 or something like that, because I've been around. And I think if you can find somebody that has that kind of lineage, like, pay attention, because they've got a lot to share. Starhawk is an excellent example. She is freaking amazing still. And she was, protesting and walking the talk when she was 15 years old in the 70s,
Yeah.
It's amazing that we have these valuable teachers at our fingertips now through the internet and computers and social media, but a lot of them get ignored because all the flashy stuff that's going around and the cute faces or the cute backgrounds or the cute ideas, and it's, don't get me wrong, I'm not dissing creators who come up with new ideas and that are valid in the craft. Like, please keep doing that, because we need more ideas. Like, it's great to pull inspiration from each other. Just don't copy each other. If you see something that's, would work for you on somebody's social media and you're like, oh, cool, I want to try that. But you get into it and you're like, oh, wait, that didn't feel right. How do you make it feel right for you? How do you make it your own? How do you do things that match your energy, but also make things simple for you? And I think that's where innovation really comes in. It's like, we're making things simpler to practice. We're making the craft easier to practice through these little innovations, but it hampers it when we can't find our own authenticity in it.
And on the last note about fake accounts, people impersonating other witches, if you want to work with us, that's what I learned from this scam experience when I was impersonating. I tried to find the positive, and that's what I learned, is there are more people who want to work with me than currently are. So I, like I said, I don't want to come across as scammy, so I don't reach out and DM people. Right. But if you want to work with me, please message me. You can email me too, but I'm happy to be messaged on Instagram or Facebook. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I really do want to work with you, and we want to see you succeed. Yeah. Like, I've had people message me and, they don't know how to ask what they want to ask, and they'll just say hi. Yeah. And that's fine. That's all you have to say. Like, just say hi and, I listen to the podcast or something, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely.
Because I'd rather you talk to me than the scammer.
Absolutely. Like, and I think that's a big thing is I think so many people are afraid to reach out to these people that they follow because we put people on a pedestal way too easily. And we need to take people off of those pedestals. Like, I will say that up front right now, do not put me on a pedestal. I do not want to be up there.
We aren't perfect.
It's uncomfortable.
We're here to help you get to where we are and further. We are never here to say we're the best, but if you're lucky, maybe someday you can get. No, like, we want to help you. We will reach down, pick you up, take you here, and be like, all right, stand on my shoulders and get up there. Like, that's what a teacher does. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, and I don't want to be on this pedestal, and I think that's that's my shadow again. Another reason why I don't like the idea of being called priestess or high priestess. You know, I've just gotten used to elder because that's how we address each other in the coven. But I don't like the hierarchical, patriarchal, colonized view of who has all the knowledge, who's holding all the marbles, basically, because each of us has a share in it. You know, there's this big basket of marbles. We each get a share. And my strengths are not necessarily your strengths. And why can't we honor that in each other? You know, I am not this person sitting in this beautiful studio with all this money coming in. And, you know, what's the typical like Western idea of success and prosperity? You know, the cars and the houses and blah, 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 vacations and stuff like that. Seriously, like, I'm hustling every day. I work hard every single day. And I'm sure you are too. So how are you any different than me? How am I different than you? We're both working. We just have different things we work at, and that's okay. But making time each day to practice our craft, that's what's really important on this path. How do we make it a part of our life? And I don't see how that puts anybody up on a pedestal. That just makes us, you know, I have a different way of doing things, so you could benefit from that. So let's do it together. So yeah, reach out to me. Find me in my community, in the Rebel Mystic community, in the academy, and let's learn together. Like, maybe you have something you could teach me, and I'd be like, "Oh, mind blown! I love this!" Right?
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how once the communities start to grow, my Patreon community now, as of recording this, has 10 people in it, and it's nice. It's coven sized, you know. So we're learning from each other, and we're setting the trajectory together. So it's become so much different than I thought it would be when I started. And that's what matters. Like, when you join my community, you're part of it. It's a community. Yes. It's not didactic. It's not lecturing. I'm here as a lifeline for you, but it's also a way for you to feel fulfilled in what you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I was missing in the greater like Facebook scheme of things. It's like, people would pop on, they do their lives, and they talk at you. Where I prefer, let's talk together. Like, let's get a circle together and look at each other and like share. And this is what community is. It's about each of us contributing rather than having this one person doing all the work and one person shining above all others, and no one else really gets heard because one person's voice is louder than everyone else. Merry meet,
merry part, and merry meet again.
Thank you for joining us on the Magick Kitchen Podcast. Please visit my website, leandrawitchwood.com, for news, information, and more episodes.
I'm Elyse Welles, and I can be found at Seeking Numina on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and seekingnumina.com. That's Seeking, Numina.